My customers offer me so much richness for writing. Every customer has a story. You there?
This land, this richly farmed America, it's been for centuries fertile soil for ideas. From Saint-Jean de Crèvecoeur in the 18th century, Hawthorne and Bryant in the 19th, John Steinbeck and William Faulkner, and Dori Sanders. Yes, Dori Sanders. She came from different stock, her row harder to hoe than other great American authors, but her mind is richer than peach trees at harvest. NBC's Tom Vitale met her.
All right, boy, let's get them, let's get them, let's get them.
At first light each morning, Dori Sanders goes into her orchards. Dori, her brother Orestes, and their hired hands pick only the ripe peaches, the ones they will sell the same day.
Somebody done sold my milk cow.
Boy, let's get these peaches.
Wonder who's gonna buy my turn.
It's hard work, and they pick 7 days a week.
Every fall we quit. But then in the spring, we'll start maybe just for the sake of it, start tilling a little soil. Once you smell the freshness of that turned soil, once you get out there, you crank up your tractors and you're farming all over again. We want to quit, but we can't. Okay?
Peaches cover only 15 of the 200 acres on the family farm. On the rest, they grow Crowder peas and okra, corn and watermelon. But it's Dori's tree-ripened peaches, her Albertas and her Sunhighs, Blake's, Monroe's, and Georgia Belle's that are the pride of the Sanders farm.
When you only have a few acres of peaches, you can cater to them. I can literally walk up to certain varieties. This morning I was picking the Monroe's, and I sort of look at that little peach, and I'll say to that little peach, honey, are you ready to come off today? And that little peach, if I just touch it and it doesn't fall into my hand, I leave it there. And then the next day when I come back, that peach falls in, tree ripe. Oh, the taste is wonderful.
This is a busy time here on Sanders Farm. There is a bumper peach crop. And for Dori Sanders, this year's harvest is even sweeter.
It's a wonderful recipe.
For the first time in a decade, Dori didn't have to travel north last winter to a second job to keep the farm running. She was able to stop working as a banquet manager in a Maryland hotel because of the success of her first novel, Clover. Clover is the story of a 10-year-old black girl being raised by her white stepmother. The setting is a peach farm, much like Dori's, here in upcountry South Carolina. The story is told by the 10-year-old Clover.
People are filing past my daddy's coffin. My stepmama, Sarah Kate, is wedged between me and my Uncle Jim Ed, squeezed in between us on the crowded bench, like vanilla cream between dark chocolate cookies. My daddy is dead, stretched out in a fancy coffin, right before my very eyes. And all I can think of is an Oreo cookie, an Oreo cookie.
Wow, look at that.
In the novel, Clover's white stepmother has come from out of town to live in an integrated community, very much like Filbert, where Sanders Farm is. In Dori's fiction, as in her life, racism is not an issue.
It makes an old woman look like a young girl. There's that pulling together of farmers. I call it a communality of spirit. If there's a rainstorm coming up and your crop is being threatened, you don't say, well, if you're a black farmer, you don't have any help from the white farmer, or if you're a black farmer, you're not going to help the white farmer. We help each other. And I think farmers have all along been very, very close. That's the kind of community Filbert truly has always been.
When Clover appeared last year, the novel reached number 3 on the Washington Post bestseller list. This spring, 35,000 paperbacks are in print. But Sanders wasn't thinking about publishing when she wrote her first story 5 years ago.
I wanted to lure my nieces and nephews back to the farm. I thought of all the wonderful things that I experienced growing up. I thought of the creeks that used to just teem with catfish and bass and all of those things. And I thought, if I wrote it interestingly enough, it would bring them back to the farm. We finished this crop here. That was the Alberta. That's this peach. We're just finishing up with that one. Now
her nephews and nieces never came back to the farm. That first story was rejected by her publisher, but Dori Sanders kept on writing and farming. She has never missed a growing season here. She was born on this land in 1924, the 8th of 10 children. Her father, Marion Sylvester Sanders, bought 81 acres here in 1915, then planted his peach trees. He was the principal of the town's 2-room elementary school, where Dori was a student. Even though she never went beyond high school, Dori got a real-life education on the family farm. There were the ravages of the boll weevils in the 1930s and of Hurricane Hugo just 2 years ago. German POWs picked in the orchards during World War II. And it was here, between the fields of peaches and okra, that Dori became a storyteller.
I think it was all because of this rock. When we were little, we used to come, well, young, we used to come over and we would spread out our little flat rocks all around the surface of this rock. Then while we were eating wild hickory nuts, then we would have a storyteller to position themselves here and write this little spot. Of course, I fitted in better when I was younger, but we'd sit here and then we'd tell those wonderful stories. Once upon a time is the way they always told us. My brother Orestes was the person that showed me this rock first, and he told me the story of why it had all the pot marks in it. He said it was because when it was soft, the devil walked on it, and these are his footprints. We could hear our parents calling us. I can hear them now. Dori and I wouldn't say anything because we didn't want to be disrupted. I would hear my brother's name called, oh, rest us. We were hiding out with our hickory nuts and with our stories. Hey, how you doing? All right, good to see you again. Come around and tell me what you think of my peaches.
Dori Sanders says she's always writing stories in her mind, and she writes about what she knows, life as it passes by the peach shed on Highway 321.
Are you happy to have her home with you, your daughter?
Yeah, she's leaving tomorrow.
She's leaving tomorrow, and you miss seeing that wonderful daughter of yours. The last time I saw him, he told me stories, wonderful stories about old times. Bye-bye, Mr. Brandon, be good. Wonderful stories, and now he's old. That image of that man in the green with those little tiny glasses and with the sudden onslaught of age that has so drastically changed him from the last time I saw him is indelibly imprinted in my mind. That's how I write. I write that way by seeing those images, because see, I wrote a story about him while I was standing there gazing at him.
Dori has already delivered the manuscript of her second novel to her publisher. Now, she's finally beginning to think of herself as a writer.
And I get up in the morning and I sit out and I want to feel writerly, and I'll look out and listen to the mourning dove or the rain crow make that haunting sound, and I'll say, I'm a writer. And then someone will jolt me right out of that wonderful jaded feeling, and they'll tell me, get your tractor out here in a hurry, and I'm back to real life.
For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, Filbert, South Carolina.
This coming Thursday is Halloween, a time for ghosts and witches to fly in our imagination if nowhere else. But in Salem, Massachusetts, where accused witches were put to death back in 1692, there are today several hundred women who claim to be real witches, and they say they're proud of what they practice. And so once again, their day or night, as the case may be, is coming. Here's Tom Vitale.
At first glance, Salem is just another old, quaint New England seaport, 15 miles north of Boston. But Salem will always be associated with one of the darkest episodes in American history, the witch hunts of 1692. That winter, 2 girls who were inexplicably ill were diagnosed by the village doctor as being possessed by Satan. The girls accused others of sending apparitions to torment them, and hysteria broke out. Before the end of the year, 200 townspeople were brought to trial as witches who had signed pacts with the devil. 19 were hanged, and 1 man was pressed to death with stones. All of the victims of the witch hunts who were executed here in 1692 refused to confess to false charges. Today, Salem has become something of a witchcraft center, with more than 2,000 working witches in the city. And these witches are proud of what they practice.
I don't want to be called the Tooth Fairy. I am a witch. The word witch is delicious. It's a wonderful word. It's a wonderful religion. It's a nature religion. It is gentle and nurturing and healing, comfortable, peaceful, non-threatening. You'll never see a witch war. I love the word witch. I'm proud of it. And we don't want to be called anything else but witches. I cast this circle to protect us from all negative and positive energies and forces that may come to do us harm, so mote it be.
The craft practiced by today's witches of Salem is a pagan tradition that goes back to the ancient Celts. They do not believe in the devil, and they have sworn to do no harm. They do believe in psychic powers and in enhancing those powers through the essences of nature contained in crystals, stones, and herbs.
And we draw the elements of earth, air, fire, and water, and the Great Spirit into this sacred space. The robe covers our body with black that absorbs light in the rainbow. The chalice comes from pre-Christian times. The golden chalice of the goddess is to drink the energy of the goddess and put the goddess into your body. And the knife represents, or the wand represents, the god. I invoke the god and goddess within my body. Good, I'm glad you're here.
Lori Cabot is an elder and teacher among the 13 covens of Salem. She owns a witch supply store and is known as the official witch of Salem. It's a title given her by Governor Dukakis back in 1975, along with an award for her work with disabled children. When Cabot had experiences with precognition as a teenager, she began to study comparative religion with a Boston librarian.
And I realized then that this woman who was guiding me through this knowledge herself was a witch, an ordained high priestess, who then initiated me into the craft at the age of 16. I'm now 60 years old. I've been a witch almost all my life.
Salem has turned the infamy of its witch trials into a lucrative tourist industry that draws 500,000 visitors a year, and the mayor hopes to double that figure this year. At the Witch Museum, they explain the trials of 1692 with dioramas and haunted house-style effects.
There shall be no reversals of justice in this place. Gallows Hill, the place where they died, stands today in sight of a mental hospital.
Lori Cabot and the other witches of Salem settled here precisely to counter the historic image of witchcraft. They are particularly concerned now as the city gets ready to commemorate the 300th anniversary of the witch hunts.
They need to make some kind of statement about what witchcraft is, so that the million people walking through Salem do not go back home to Iowa or to California thinking that witches consort with the devil or that we even believe in one.
This is for $3.
What sort of prejudice have you experienced?
Well, there are people who run the gamut of expression of their fear or their intolerance of witches. They can either look at you and cackle and say, "Turn me into a toad." And of course, witches have a standard line. We look at them and say, "It looks like someone beat me to it." Or you can have the other kind of person, and this happened when my children were very little. I dressed in my robes and cape, had two little girls walking down the street, and a man stopped his car, rolled down the window and said, "I hope they burn you this time."
Sean Poirier came to Salem to study with Lori Cabot. He makes his living doing psychic readings at $25 a head. Poirier is sure that his magic works, but he warns that a good witch is a responsible witch.
I do teach people how to cast love spells, but I say that's like a loaded, that's like a loaded thing. You gotta watch and how you aim and fire it, because there's one rule in casting spells: be careful what you wish for and be very specific, because you will get it.
Why don't we say, we are pleased to announce the reintroduction into the line of products we now offer of talismans from the Greater Key of Solomon the King.
Fine.
Gypsy and Richard Ravish run a wholesale witch supply mail-order business out of their home in Salem. Their motto is, cast a mighty spell in your home or office.
Yeah, we started out making things. We made our own incenses and magical cords and talismans. And Richard was making pentacles, and we put them in consignment in maybe 1 or 2 stores. Now we have about 750 stores.
The most fun is the witch's ball.
Laurie Cabot says the growing interest in witchcraft has never surprised her.
In everyone's heart, we're always holding on or wishing on a star. It's very important to believe in your own magic. It's real.
On Halloween, the witches of Salem will celebrate the pagan New Year with a candlelight ceremony commemorating the victims of the 1692 witch hunts. And, says Laurie Cabot, they will form a magic circle to cast a spell for better understanding of their craft in the coming year. For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, Salem, Massachusetts.
This morning, we're going to meet some creative minds, people who look at life from their private, individual angle and then present their picture of it to us. Dennis Potter is one of those people, among the most interesting television writers of our time, whose credits also include 6 feature films and 3 nonfiction books. He's just made his debut as a director. At the age of 56, he's far too young to be a museum piece, but his work isn't. Here's Tom Vitale.
It's sometimes very difficult to distinguish the textual feel, tone of a movie or a television show, increasingly worldwide, but particularly so here, from something that is selling you something.
Dennis Potter's 2 BBC series, Pennies from Heaven and The Singing Detective, developed a huge cult following when they were shown in this country, in part because they were unlike anything ever seen on American TV. For British television, Potter often creates disturbing portraits of people struggling with their memories and desires. In his 1965 drama Stand Up Nigel Barton, Potter adds a resonance to the hero's schoolboy memories by having adult actors play the children's roles.
Oh, stop sniveling, you idiot. Go on, Nigel.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Did you hear that, Pringle?
Love your enemy.
4 years later, in Son of Man, Potter put modern language in the mouth of an impassioned Christ who sometimes doubts his own faith.
Who would kick you and spit at you. Love the soldier who drives his sword in your belly. Love the brigand who robs and tortures you. Love your enemy. Listen to me, listen to me. Listen to me. I want you to listen to me.
Hello, my darling Patricia.
Don't be a fool. She can't understand you.
Potter's 1976 drama, Brimstone and Treacle, about a demonic young man sexually abusing a disabled girl, was banned by the BBC for 11 years on grounds of taste.
I will not fail to meet thee in that hollow vale.
I had 2 small children, and the 3rd one on the way. And I lost my job, and I knew that there was, in some sense, that I had to reinvent myself.
Dennis Potter's surprising stories grew out of a career with its own unexpected plot twist. He started out as a reporter for a labor newspaper in London. He turned to writing television in the early 1960s after he was struck with severe psoriasis and arthritis, which has affected him on and off ever since.
It defined my dignity to be able to write. At least I could feed my family. But also I've discovered that I wasn't bad at it either.
He's taking culture seriously instead of it being a piece of fluff that sells products.
New York Times critic John O'Connor says Dennis Potter is important because television is important. Potter's work is a model of what drama for the small screen can be.
If we're going to have the Eugene O'Neills, the Tennessee Williams, the Arthur Millers of tomorrow, they're going to have to go through television in one form or another. And Potter is important because he says that it is possible to do original, provocative work on television.
In a quarter century of writing for television, Dennis Potter has always been an innovator. In Pennies from Heaven, he came up with a new way of using music to get inside a character's head. The characters burst into songs, but it's not a musical. They're lip-syncing popular hits of the day that express what they're feeling inside.
Oh, come on, Emily.
Knew that from the start. Mummy warned me about that.
Yeah, common as muck.
The story is about a music salesman during the Depression, frustrated by his business and his marriage.
Well, if you will.
Make the tea? Oh.
No, the other.
What?
The other. A bit of the other.
You filthy beast.
Somewhere the sun is shining, so honey, don't you cry. We'll find a silver lining, the clouds will soon roll by.
That very first scene of Pennies from Heaven, when Bob Hoskins turns around, and what you hear is not Hoskins, but a voice from the past, Elsa Carlisle, singing, representing what the Hoskins characters feels, is totally revolutionary in television and in all media.
Ron Simon is the curator of the Potter Retrospective at the Museum of Television and Radio. While the phrase television art may be an oxymoron in this country, Simon says Potter's work belongs in any museum.
He deals with the same themes that you see in a museum of modern art. In many ways, he approximates what Picasso is doing in painting. He's trying to do in television. He's playing with time. He's playing with layers of reality, trying to represent what it feels like to live in this century.
Dennis Potter's latest project is a feature film, his first as a writer and director. Secret Friends opens with the hero, played by Alan Bates, in the dining car of a train to London, unable to remember who he is, where he's going, or whether he has killed his wife.
Anything wrong here, gents? Everything all right?
Everything is coming up roses.
Well, I hope it's nothing that's been brought on by the food, sir.
For God's sake.
It's my job, sir.
Can't you see that this man is not well?
I can see that very well, sir, and it's my job to see there's nothing amiss with... What was it the gentleman had? The fish, yes?
Fish?
Sole, sir.
And you'd have done better with the steak.
This is British.
In Secret Friends, as in Potter's best work for television, the story takes place in the mind of the hero, and the action alternates between the present, memories, and fantasies, without letting the viewer know which is which.
You know, we've all got this little theatre bobbing on top of our shoulders, and it's our mind, and our mind is full of the past, our present feelings. If it really is what it's like to sit in that mind and to feel what it's like behind the bones of the head, is what the kind of, I use another old-fashioned word, drama that I'm interested in. That is what I'm interested in.
Dennis Potter has completed a new 6-part TV series about the Cold War called Lipstick on Your Collar. For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, New York.
The Museum of Television and Radio in New York is screening many of Potter's television programs and will continue the screenings through June. After that, his work slated to become part of the museum's collection, available for viewing on private video screens.
His own way, he knows how to expand that television screen, something new there. Next, we're going to turn to something quite different. Iraq, Tariq Aziz, a well-known face back in this country. We'll be talking to him as we continue. Well, those of you who are looking for some makeup ideas this morning, do we have something for you?
This is really cutting edge.
Really cutting edge.
Yes, it is. In fact, there's a show playing off Broadway here in New York City that is by any measure a challenge. I must warn you, if you're eating breakfast, stop right now, okay? 3 actors costumed as blue aliens drum, chew, spit, and do other unusual things on stage to dramatize the isolation and pretension in modern life. Guess what? It's a hit. It's called Tubes, created and performed by a trio called Blue Man Group. Tom Vitale tells us about it.
Tubes is about the rhythm of life at the end of the millennium and the intertwining elements that make up that beat. When Blue Man Group got together 3 years ago, they wanted to leave the everyday world behind, to create entertainment for our time as exotic as a 19th century circus.
At one point we were thinking, what would it be like to create something that had the same feel of a circus, but not now in 1850, when people had never seen an elephant before, they'd never seen a photograph before, they hadn't seen acrobats who could do these wild things before.
We wanted to make the whole environment to be just a different kind of place than you've ever been before.
And we set out to create a live experience, to create something that would be exciting and funny and wild to look at.
So they came up with a character who would represent modern man and brought a new twist to the idea of feeling blue. Matt Goldman.
I love being blue, getting ready for a show and then being blue in the show.
I think I feel this amazing spirit, this amazing emotion trying to get out, and like it's in these confinements and it just wants to bust out.
When Phil Stanton is transforming himself into a blue alien, he says it's the character's humanness that wells up inside.
It becomes a very emotional thing that's just trying to be bridled and waiting for an opportunity to explode.
Part of the populist message is that art doesn't have to be this distant, intellectual, elitist, confusing, confounding entity. It's something that is really available and essential for everyone. And it's something that everyone actually knows already. They don't have to be taught anything.
Inside the digital frontier allows for trips to places otherwise inaccessible in the real world.
Another message in Tubes is the impact of new technology that's supposed to improve the quality of life. Blue Man Chris Wink.
There's a wonderful technology that can allow you to watch your VCR at home alone, and you don't have to leave your house, but there's an alienating quality to some of these things. So it was really a question that we thought we'd raise, which is, as we go forward with these developments in the technology, how can we harness them in a way that doesn't always end up with the individual alone?
Tubes often contrasts high technology with low comedy. The Blue Men discover syncopation while eating Captain Crunch cereal. The members of Blue Man Group explain even the silliest skits in Tubes with deadpan earnestness. They describe the show as an archaeological dig on present-day America.
When we go back to look at a culture, we look at the artwork that they did, we look at the things they ate, we look at the tools they used, which is to say their technology, and we look at some of the things they do in their leisure time, if they had it.
Tubes ends with a sensory barrage, a pulsing day-glow party of music, swirling tubes, and rolls of crepe paper. Chris Wink hopes the finale will help the audience to connect with the odd blue men on stage and to leave the theater charged with a creative spirit in spite of an often dehumanizing world.
We wanted to tap into that vital force, a vibrance of just life, an experience of being uplifted, of feeling like something can happen, something exciting, things can change. And that is something that we want to have be dripping out of the stage, an explosion of being alive.
For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, at the Astor Place Theater in New York.
I'll tell you, bring a raincoat if you're sitting in the first row. In any event, we'll continue with more news, weather updates, and a whole lot more when Sunday Today continues.
On this Labor Day weekend, time to remember the struggles between labor and management that characterized the early part of this century. This weekend, in fact, is the 70th anniversary of one of those struggles in the coal fields of West Virginia. Coal is king in the mountains of Appalachia, but the people have paid a high price. Unionization in the 30s bettered pay and working conditions, but the animosity between labor and the mine owners has continued. Now the workers and the owners are at loggerheads over proposals to strip mountaintops for coal operations that would be performed by non-union workers. The debate has classic overtones as well as an environmental spin, and NBC's Tom Vitale went to take a look.
Logan County, southern West Virginia. Since the turn of the century, men have mined coal here. Blair Mountain stretches 25 miles along the northeast border of Logan County. It is another ripple in the vast sea of ridges and peaks that make up the Appalachian Range. But to some folks in West Virginia, this ridge is hallowed ground. This sign is the only hint that something happened here at Blair Mountain. There are no plaques, no monuments, no statues. But 70 years ago, this was the site of the largest labor insurrection in the nation's history. 7,000 miners took up arms. They came here to fight for their union. It was called the Battle of Blair Mountain.
Gonna march to Blair Mountain, gonna whoop the company, and I don't want you to weep after me.
By 1920, the United Mine Workers were the largest union in the country. But in Logan County, the coal companies paid Sheriff Don Chafin a nickel for every ton of coal mined to keep the union out. Chafin hired a private army of deputies to shoot organizers and jail miners who joined the union. In neighboring Mingo County, Sheriff Sid Hatfield stood up for striking miners in the town of Matewan. On August 1st, 1921, Hatfield was gunned down by company guards. Stirred by news of the shooting, Union officials in Kanawha County to the north organized 7,000 miners to march through Logan and Mingo. They had 3 goals: to free imprisoned miners, to set up Union locals, and to hang Sheriff Chafin. But first they had to cross Blair Mountain. Chafin gathered 2,000 deputies and state militia to defend the ridge. Machine guns were installed and small planes were hired. Skirmishes broke out on August 26th. Joe Ball was 11 years old.
We heard this little plane flying over, and we saw the man lifted the bomb now, and he stood over the side and dropped it. In about 2 or 3 seconds, we heard a revolve. Blowed a hole about the size of that apple tree out there in the ground.
On September 3rd, federal troops sent by President Harding arrived. The Union leaders called off the march, and the miners went home. In a week of fighting, 16 men were killed and 50 wounded. The miners lost this battle, but eventually won the war. In 1933, under FDR's New Deal, the Union came to Logan County. Today, a second battle of Blair Mountain is underway.
It's one of the largest blocks of good mineable coal of this quality left in this area.
People died here, people were wounded here, people sacrificed. Certainly that deserves to be preserved and taught and passed on and kept for eternity.
The A.T. Massey Coal Company has filed an application to strip mine 4 miles of the Blair Ridge west of the peak. If the permit goes through, the mine will be similar to this one nearby, with 200 feet of the mountaintop removed from the ridge. It is a 20-year project Massey hopes to operate with non-union labor.
We've got to eventually tear down these structures.
George Diles is president of Massey Coal Services. His father and his grandfather were union men who died in mining accidents in Logan County. And his great-uncle was an organizer who fought at Blair Mountain in 1921. Diles says what Logan needs now is jobs, not museums.
We've been delayed over a year in trying to get this project permitted, largely due to the union's opposition to it. And there are 350 people out here in southern West Virginia who aren't working because of it.
The union wants all 25 miles of the Blair Ridgeline preserved as a state park, with a museum at the peak. UMW Vice President Cecil Roberts is the great-nephew of Bill Blizzard, who led the 1921 uprising.
We would not go to Mount Rushmore and start taking an end loader and a truck and hauling Mount Rushmore off, and we should not come here and load up West Virginia heritage and history and working class people's proud background and haul it away in the back of a damn coal truck.
A 30-day injunction has barred Massey from mining at Blair Mountain while their permit is reviewed. For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, Blair Mountain, West Virginia.
John Sayles is nothing if not versatile. He is best known as a filmmaker. Return of the Secaucus 7, Mate 1, 8 Men Out, among others. He is also a novelist and actor and editor. His 7th and latest film, City of Hope, which opens October 11th, tells a variety of stories about its characters. It cost a fraction of what other producers spent. He's never spent more than $6 million on a film. Some of his filmmaking brethren could blow that on the catering alone. Tom Vitale visited Sayles in his adopted hometown of Hoboken, New Jersey.
What sets John Sayles apart from other writers and filmmakers is his knack for telling many stories within a single story.
People see the world differently, and very often to tell the stories I want to tell, I have to include that difference in vision, that difference in point of view, to tell the whole story. You have the usual, crime movie, and you're kind of sympathetic to the bank robbers, and there's this awful scene when they go in and they shoot up the bank because something goes wrong, and the security guard, decides to pull a gun on them, they blow them away. Okay, usually that security guard is some, older actor with gray hair, and they say, wait a minute, and then they get shot, and that's their whole part. You start to think about it and say, well, what if we knew who this guy was?
In Sayles' new film, City of Hope, there is not one hero, but 38 featured roles, including politicians, building contractors, and local residents in a fictional New Jersey city.
Well, it is a story about a whole city. It's about the way that people's lives are interdependent, whether they think so or not. And the way that what you do may not come back and affect you directly, but it will affect somebody else, and that will affect somebody else, and that will affect somebody else. And 10 years down the line, it may affect you, or it may affect your children.
Nice rig you got here, O'Brien. You're doing all right for yourself. I can always be doing better. Aw, I hate to see a man unsatisfied with his station in life.
In City of Hope, Sayles cast himself in the role of Carl, a local hoodlum and a fence for stolen goods. Carl is forced to cut deals with the police to stay in business.
The vending machine hijack, Layman's Furs, fire on the waterfront. Why not throw in the Kennedy assassination?
Sayles filmed City of Hope in Cincinnati because it was cheaper to shoot there. But the idea of the city itself was modeled in part on Hoboken.
I think my experience here, but also being close to both Jersey City and Newark. Very dense, urban, ethnically diverse cities, and seeing their problems. This area has seen quite a few people running for mayor from jail and doing fairly well. I've learned a lot here and seen a lot of things in action.
As American cities go, Hoboken is unremarkable, with a few exceptions. There's a terrific view of the Manhattan skyline. Frank Sinatra was born here. They played the first game of baseball on record here. And for the past decade, John Sayles has called Hoboken home. Sayles is a man of many talents. He writes screenplays and novels, acts, and directs. But all of his books and films grow out of a single obsession, with the lives and language of ordinary working-class Americans. Because he likes Bruce Springsteen's music, Sayles directed this video without taking a fee. He began Born in the USA with images of a rippling American flag, oil rig workers, and rundown homes. Long before he started directing films, John Sayles wrote fiction. In the 1970s, he published 2 novels and a collection of award-winning stories. This spring, his first novel in 12 years was hailed by critics as a triumphant return. Los Gusanos is the story of Cuban emigres in Miami who took part in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. As in City of Hope, the novel tells the stories of dozens of characters.
There's a chapter in Los Gusanos where in about 9 or 10 pages, I do the Bay of Pigs invasion from one character's point of view. With all the boats and the tanks and the soldiers and the planes and the bombs and the heat and all that kind of stuff, to do that 9-page section in a movie and see the same things and feel the same things would cost about $40 million. And that's only one little part of the story. So there's that practical consideration that I can work on a scale, both a physical scale and an emotional scale that I can't work on in movies.
In his fiction and screenplays, John Sayles has an extraordinary ear for dialogue. He says his experience as an actor has been his greatest teacher.
I was an actor before I was a writer or a director. And that sense of voice that you have to have as an actor, what is the rhythm that this person speaks in? That sense of point of view. How does this person see this world of this play? There's a famous story about somebody running into an actor at a party in the 40s and saying, "So what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm in this new play called Streetcar Named Desire." He says, "Oh, what do you play?" And he says, "Well, I play a doctor who, you know, comes all the way from Baltimore to help a woman in distress." Well, what's the play about? Well, it's about a doctor who comes all the way from Baltimore to help a woman in distress. And this is a guy who has like one line in the whole play, and he comes in at the very end. But from his point of view, that is what the play is about.
Sayles says he thinks of himself as just a storyteller, and he hopes his stories are useful to the people who come to them.
They may be useful only as entertainment, which is like a good meal and you burp and you forget about it. They may be useful in something that you actually can apply to your life or to apply to thinking about your life. They may be useful 5 years down the line when you find yourself in a situation and you say, well, I saw this in the movie, you know, and that movie in some way has prepared me for something that I'm experiencing in my real life now, and I'm not going to make some mistake that I might make.
John Sayles says the key to making his stories interesting is that to him, nobody is ordinary. He hopes to make his next film from a screenplay he's written about a paraplegic woman and her caretaker in Louisiana. For Sunday Today, Tom Vitale, NBC News, Hoboken, New Jersey.